Hi, my name is Cassie Ryan, and I will be discussing marine education through tide pooling. So, I studied abroad in Costa Rica, where I studied the effectiveness of marine protected areas there, and I conducted biodiversity surveys comparing protected and unprotected areas. So, after that experience, I became very passionate about marine conservation, and I knew that for my Eli project, I wanted to do something with the ocean. So I decided I wanted to create a species identification guide in order to help foster appreciation for the marine ecosystem. Initially, I wanted to create a guide to Santa Barbara's fish, but weekly snorkeling and or scuba diving proved to be a pretty difficult task. So instead, I transitioned to creating a species guide for intertidal species and lead tide pooling excursions to help educate the public on responsible tide pooling. So, my mountaintop goal was to build a lasting connection between people of Santa Barbara and the intertidal ecosystems of our community by creating a marine education program teaching community members how to appreciate and explore tide pools responsibly. And then my SMART goal was that I tide pooled once a week during winter quarter and collected data and photographs of 16 marine organisms in the Santa Barbara intertidal zone. I created a waterproof identification guide, which included their natural history and their conservation status. And then I partnered with at least 3 local organizations, actually 4 now. And I led 2 educational excursions using the guide. So here is an example of a portion of the tide pooling guide. As you can see, I have a photo of the animal up top, and then I have a description which includes their size, their diet, their range, a fun fact, and their conservation status. So up here we have the California sea hare, which is up to 16 inches long and eats red algae, eelgrass, and sea lettuce. And then a fun fact about it is that when it's threatened, it releases a dark purple fluid in defense. And I've never seen that happen, but it would definitely be cool to see. And then down here we have tide pooling etiquette. So I have a whole portion of the guide dedicated to how to explore tide pools responsibly and help encourage marine ecosystem protection. So one thing on there is knowing the rules of the area. So, for example, Campus Point and Devs are both in a marine protected area, meaning the whole area is a no-take zone. In marine protected areas, there's a lot of special regulations, and so it's very important to know the regulations of a place that you're going to before you go. Another thing is leave no trace. Don't trample the ecosystem. Don't leave trash behind. And if you're picking up a rock, make sure that you return the rock to where it was found. So stuff like that is all in the guide in order to ensure that people are tide pooling responsibly. So throughout my Eli project, I led 2 guided tide pooling excursions in order to teach community members and UCSB students about intertidal species and marine conservation. So for my first excursion, I led an interactive tide pooling trip to Devs for Earth Month. The people who were putting on Earth Month were kind enough to give me funding, and I was able to print out 30 waterproof copies of the guide and distribute them to the people who attended the event. I also had some Ivy Co-op gift cards to give them out as incentives to people who attended the event. So for this first one, we went to the tide pools at Devs and we discovered some cool chitons and some awesome anemones. And I got to teach community members about marine conservation. And it seemed like the people who attended were very receptive, and I could see them using the guide, which was awesome. One of them bent down with the guide and was like looking at an anemone and was like, "This one's a sunburst," because they were looking at the guide, and that was a really good feeling for sure. And then for my next excursion, it's actually today in an hour. I'm going to be leading a tide pooling event with Environmental Affairs Board. And we are going to be doing it as a beach cleanup and a tide pooling event. So I'm going to have trash bags for people, and we're going to walk around Campus Point and get to clean up trash, and then also spend some time tide pooling. And I'll once again give out waterproof versions of the guide. I'm excited for that. And then another really important part of my ELA project is ensuring longevity of the project. And so I wanted to institutionalize my guide at various marine educational facilities in Santa Barbara. The Hollister Ranch Conservancy runs a tide pool school, so I got in contact with them. And now I have a QR code linking to the online version of my guide, and I also have some physical copies at the center. They're using my guide as training material for their docents, which is super exciting. So the people who run the tide pool school will actually get to learn from my guide. So I'm very happy about that. And then I also have physical and online copies of the guide available at the Santa Barbara Visitors Center. So visitors who are coming to Santa Barbara and just taking the day to go and explore and learn about what Santa Barbara has to offer now have a free and accessible species guide so that when they go tide pooling, they can see what's going on there. And then I've not yet dropped off copies, but the Reef will also have a copy of my guide, both online and in a physical edition. And I'm working on reaching out to a couple more places to see if they would like the guide as well. So I definitely learned some important leadership skills throughout the ELI process. First of all, I learned how to talk to strangers on Zoom, which was honestly a really valuable skill. Learning how to keep the conversation going and steer the conversation in the direction I wanted it to go, and just being able to gain valuable insights from a 15-minute meeting are really important skills. Because sometimes you hop on and you have to make small talk, or it's a little awkward, or you don't know what to say. But I've definitely improved with that as the Eli project has gone on. And I would say overall that helped me gain confidence in interpersonal speaking skills. I also learned persistence and determination. When I was struggling with certain aspects of my project, I learned to troubleshoot rather than giving up. And Tessa and Erica, my mentors, were amazing helps during this. So, for example, there was this certain species of anemone that I couldn't identify and they couldn't identify, and they put me in contact with some biologists, and the biologists also couldn't identify the anemone. But instead of giving up, we learned to troubleshoot and we learned to work around it. And yeah, so I definitely learned determination throughout this project. And so moving forward, I would definitely like to lead more educational tide pooling excursions using the guide. I think those were super productive and I had a great time during them, and I think the people who attended them did as well. And I would also like to get the online version of my guide available at more locations, such as the Santa Barbara Natural History Museum at the Sea Center. Having my guide at the Sea Center would be really cool, for sure. And then if you want to scan this QR code here, you can access an online version of the field guide. Thank you.